Okay, well, welcome everybody to another edition of one of our educational sessions. I'm Mike Heburn, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the partners here at Level Financial. And with me today, I have our Technology Specialist and Assistant Compliance Officer, Bethany Wagner. And what we're hoping to do tonight in this brief webinar is to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and offer some tips on what retirees can do to keep themselves protected. We just want to state we're not cybersecurity experts by definition, but we have enough experience dealing with all the cyber issues that a financial firm would have that we thought we'd take an opportunity to share what we've learned. And hopefully you'll be able to take away something from tonight's educational session that you can deploy in your own personal sphere. A couple of ground rules before we get started. If you have questions along the way, there's a Q&A button, should be on your webinar menu. Feel free to type in your question and we'll make sure that we attempt to answer that question as quickly as we possibly can. And I would say also that especially to clients of the firm, if something comes to mind during the presentation and you feel like you need some follow-up, that's why we have Bethany. So you can certainly call us here at 716-634-6113 and we'll help you through wherever your specific challenge might be. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. First, what we need to do here is just an important disclosure, make sure that everyone knows that this is an educational presentation. And to satisfy our attorneys, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to take a look at our disclosure. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about first, common fraud activity, some of the types of things that we see in our day-to-day business. We're going to talk about ways to protect your email. We'll also talk a little bit about how to be safe online when you're browsing, whether you use your cell phone, your computer. Furthermore, we'll talk about protecting your devices. What are some of the things you can do to make sure your mobile phone, your tablet, your computer, whether you have a Mac or a Windows device, are safe? And finally, we'll talk about triage, what to do if you suspect fraud. This is actually probably one of the most important categories we'll talk about tonight. When we have or suspect fraud, what do you do? How do you fix it? And where are some steps you can take? So we've got some experience here through going through some of these types of things. And I'm going to turn it over now to Bethany Wagner, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of these items.
There are a couple of recent examples of things that we've been seeing. One of the ones that I've seen fairly recently with at least two of our clients is that they've gotten calls from their bank, Bank of America, M&T, whatever you bank with, and they call and they're being so kind and alerting you that there's been a fraudulent charge on your account. Did you charge $1,000 to PayPal yesterday? And of course your response is, no, I didn't do that. And so they will very kindly offer to help you. They just need to collect a little bit of information. So you start giving them your bank account number to make sure that they can remove the fraud from it. And that really, if you ever get a call from your bank and it's not prompted by some activity that you did, your best bet is actually to just say, thank you so much for calling. I'm going to look into this, hang up on them, and then call the number on the back of your card to talk to them and to check and see if there's been fraud. Because they can spoof the cell phone number so that it looks like it's coming from Bank of America in this example, and it may not be. We did have someone who, this is a little funny to me, because the nerve of that hacker called someone. They recognized that it was maybe not a legitimate, said that they were going to call the number on the back of the card, and the fraudster called back to tell them off for calling the number on the back of the card. Whereas the response that you will get will typically be, that sounds like a good idea, and they will let you call the number that you have that you're certain is correct. Something else we've seen in the past is you get a call from family members or grandkids, and they say, I'm in Mexico, please don't tell my parents, but I've been arrested for something. I need you to wire me $10,000. The response to that, you can get the information if you want, but you're going to hang up, and again, you're going to call your grandchild to confirm that they are indeed in Mexico. Very rarely are family members going to call and request a wire transfer to a foreign country. And if you didn't know that they were traveling, then it's likely that it's going to be a spam call, and you're going to want to try to call the family member directly just to check the legitimacy. One of the things that we see a lot around this time of year, it's tax season, is phone calls from the IRS or the federal government or the FBI. The IRS is not going to call you about a problem with your tax return. They're going to send you a letter. The FBI is not going to call you unless it's something that you have prompted. So if you have a fraud case open with them, they might call you. But if you don't, they're not going to cold call you. And what you can always do, again, is hang up and call the FBI directly to see if it's a legitimate call. The other thing, the FBI is not going to call you and tell you, if you don't do what I want, we're going to send the police to you. Because if the FBI has enough to arrest you, they're not going to be kind enough to give you a phone call to warn you ahead of time. Other things that we see is you get a call from Microsoft saying, hey, your Microsoft Windows account is having problems. You've got a virus on your computer. If you just give me access, I'll hop right on and I'll take that virus off for you. Microsoft has millions, if not billions, of users. They are not going to be individually calling anyone. Something else we're seeing fairly frequently is text with links. And those are going to be, if you have a cell phone that allows you to get text, you'll see, click here to update your account, click here to get some great deal on a product. Typically speaking, if it's from a legitimate source, the advice would be don't click on any of the links. Go directly to, for example, if it's my bank saying, you can take out a loan for X amount, and I'm going, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to log in directly to my bank. I'm not going to click on any links that are emailed to me. Other things you see a lot probably in your email is going to be things from Amazon or PayPal or other online companies saying that your data has been compromised. The best piece of advice, again, don't click on those links. If you're concerned that it might be legitimate, you're going to go to the website and you're going to log in directly there. Because if it is a problem, it's going to be in your account. So some general tips to look for fraud. Is it something that's unexpected? Is it something that you have prompted because maybe you called tech support and they're calling you back? That would be probably legitimate. But if it's a cold call that you're not expecting, you should take a minute and be a little wary of it. A sense of urgency. So if they're saying you need to do something immediately right now, you can't take the time to call it back the number that you've confirmed is legitimate. They really try to get you in those moments when you're like, oh, I need to handle this, I need to do it. And they really prey on that sense of urgency. So one of the biggest things with cybersecurity is just take a minute, stop and think through some of these questions. Ask yourself, you know, is this legitimate? Because they're trying to catch you in the speed of things and not taking the time to really think through the questions. Another clue that it might be fraud is if you need to keep it secret. Don't tell anyone or you'll be in even more trouble. Things like that. Typically speaking, the IRS, the federal government, they're going to let you consult with your financial advisors. They're going to let you consult with your lawyers. They would even expect that. So if they tell you not to tell anyone anything, that's a pretty good sign that it's probably not legitimate. If it is too good to be true. So, you know, those coupons for 50% off a store that never has a sale. Why is that Nigerian prince offering to share millions of dollars with you? I mean, I think you're great, but why is he offering that to you? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And wire transfers. Those are some of the biggest areas where we see fraud because it's much easier to send an untraceable wire transfer. Once the money's left, it's gone. It can't be retrieved in most cases. So if they're asking for a wire transfer, most places will accept PayPal, they will accept credit cards, they will accept electronic checks. All of those are easier to trace. Very few places are going to ask and demand only a wire transfer as an option for payment. So be very careful when it comes to wire transfers, because again, if the numbers are wrong and it goes out, it's not coming back.
Okay, so before we move on to the next topic, I did get a couple of comments on sound quality. So yours is good. I think what we had were competing microphones. So I've muted mine since you're doing all the talking. So I hopefully everybody can hear well. So we'll move on to the next topic. Let's talk a little bit about email security. We know here from a business perspective, one of the greatest weaknesses an organization can have, a business can have, are its independent users that are clicking on links in emails. So let's talk a little bit about email security and how individuals at home can be safe.
So a lot of people say, well, if we can't secure email, then we'll just do it by snail mail. We'll just have the US Post Office handle it. And that may not be as secure as you might think. I mean, think about the process of a letter going from here to across the country. How many people have touched that letter? What's the odds that it's going to get lost? Can somebody just pick it out of your mailbox and walk off? You know, there's lots of porch pirates, as they call them, who walk and steal Amazon stuff. What's to stop them from just grabbing the mail and then suddenly they have account numbers and information, social security numbers. So there is some concern that the mail is not necessarily the safest. It also, from a safety perspective, it's slow. So if somebody is trying to alert you to a problem, it's going to take that much longer to get to you. And that means that it's going to take that much longer for you to respond to it. So speed of availability can also be an issue with snail mail. As far as links go, it is generally best practice to avoid clicking on any links in emails. One of the tricks that we use here is if you get an email with a link, you can hover your mouse pointer over the link without clicking. And what it'll do is it'll tell you what that link is actually going to take you to. So instead of it being, you know, click here, it'll actually tell you, oh, it's taking you to this website. Which is important because then you can read it and go, oh, this says that it's supposed to take me to Amazon, but it's not taking me to Amazon. Maybe that's not a legitimate link. The other advice, as I mentioned earlier, is go directly to the website or to a mobile app instead of clicking on a link in an email, if it's something where you can do that.
Yeah, one of the things too with links is you should definitely be expecting the link from somebody. And even then, that's not 100% foolproof, but best practices, of course, you know, if you talk to your sister and your sister says, I'm sending you a link in 10 minutes with pictures from our vacation, that's pretty safe. If you get an email from your sister that says, check out these pictures from our vacation, and you weren't expecting the email, that's when the radar should go up. So that's recency is also pretty important when it comes, I think, to email links.
The other thing that you want to keep in mind is if you get an email and you weren't expecting it, it is always fine to pick up the phone and give that person a call. I do it all the time at work. I get an email, it has a link I don't expect. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to take 2 minutes to make a phone call, because that can make the difference between whether or not you've compromised your computer.
And you definitely should not reply to that email, because a lot of times people have picked off the email to begin with. And if you hit reply and say, hey, is this a legitimate link? Of course, the fraudster is going to say, well, sure it is. Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely want to confirm those whenever possible. What about sending emails?
So we talk a lot in cybersecurity about personal protected information, and that's going to be any information that is, you know, personal to you, your social security number, your address, information that you don't necessarily want the general public to have access to. So any sort of personal protected information, account numbers, addresses, social security numbers, any of that sort of information, you're going to want to,
anything that a fraudster can use to impersonate you, open a credit card for you, things like that. Those are the types of things you want to avoid.
exactly. Anytime you're sending anything like that, you always want to be using encryption. You don't want to put it in the body of the email unless it's an encrypted email. You would want to send it as an encrypted attachment. Now, the nice thing in this day and age is that most businesses have the ability to send you a link with encryption. So if you were to call us up and say, I want to send you my tax return, we would say, absolutely, let me send you a secure link that you can click on to upload to us. It'll encrypt it in transit and on both ends, and you're all set to go. No hacker is going to be able to pick that up and then read that information that would be on your tax return.
Yeah, so for Level Financial, all of our employees have upload links in the signatures of their emails.
Yes.
To encourage people to, if they're sending us information, to send it using the link. And because you'd be surprised how many people will actually send us their tax return just as a PDF document, as an attachment, which is not encrypted and could be picked off by fraudsters for sure.
I can even think once or twice where somebody has sent a full account email in the body of, or a full account number in the body of the email, which is very concerning. The other thing, again, we talked about wire transfers. Wire transfers, you should always be verbally confirming them. Now, we have a policy where we always verbally confirm with our clients the wire transfer information. That includes routing numbers, because if somebody were to pick off that email and input a different routing number, the money is gone and it's not coming back.
Right. Okay, so good. That's email security. So now let's talk a little bit about security online. When you're browsing, when you're on your phone browsing, let's start with our favorite, public Wi-Fi. Why is it bad to go on public Wi-Fi?
Well, let's start with the question of who set up that public Wi-Fi and why did they set it up? Did a hacker go to a busy place like an airport and set up a public Wi-Fi and call it, Southwest free Wi-Fi, and suddenly you're clicking on it and they can gather data about you and potentially use that to access various accounts. So for example, if you're at an airport, please never log into your financial accounts while you're at an airport on Wi-Fi.
It's a great place for someone to just be sitting there watching you log in and grabbing your information.
Exactly.
Live.
So highly discourage any sort of use of personal protected information well on public Wi-Fi. Don't do it. Wait until you're home. Use your data plan through your phone. A lot of phone companies offer unlimited data. The next thing is URLs. So you really want to look for the HTTPS, because that's a sign that the URL has encryptions on it, that it's not just a general, anybody could access it.
And if you're unfamiliar with that acronym, I believe it stands for Universal. I
don't know.
It's a Universal Resource Locator, I believe, something of that nature. But it is basically the address, the web address that you would type in to a browser. Now, if you typed in www.levelfa.com to go to our website, what's actually going to happen is your browser, if it's acting properly, is going to convert that to an HTTPS www.levelfa.com because we have a secure site set up so that it will automatically send people through that encrypted connection. So you can see that when you're logging on to website. You go to CNN.com, it's going to do the same thing.
Exactly. Excuse me. The other thing with URLs is that you want to make sure that it's actually taking you to the URL. So you want to go to www.amazon.com, not www.amazon3456.com. Like if it's not the standard URL, that first initial section when you're typing it in, and that's something that you want to watch for when you're looking at links, because if a link says, www.amazon. or www.amazon.org or,
.net,
it's not actually taking you to the website that you think it is.
Right.
So it's important to set up activity alerts. Most companies will allow you to do this. So for example, on my credit card, I get notifications every time I spend over a certain dollar amount, and I get weekly notifications on what the total balance is, both pending and posted. And it's very important to set those up because you can get alerts. In my personal life, I had a situation where I got a text from my bank telling me that, I had spent $100 somewhere. I was pretty sure I hadn't, so I logged into my bank and I was able to call them immediately and say, this is a fraud. We need to stop this and reissue the debit card or whatever we needed to do to fix the situation. So it's very important to make sure that you have activity alerts set up.
Yeah. I also think too, if you want to be super, like I'm super crazy about the alerts, right? So I have my account set up to 1 cent. If anything gets charged to my account, I get an alert. What you have to guard against when you do that is, if you have a lot of activity. So my wife and I have, for example, we have American Express, same account, 2 different cards. And she probably doesn't like this, but every time she spends money on our American Express, I get an alert to see what she's spent on. The problem with something like that is you have to be super vigilant, because what can happen is you can get almost numb to the alerts. So you have to do what you're comfortable with, but certainly for every account where there's free access to spending, Schwab has this feature for all their cards. I have a Schwab account. Anytime an ATM withdrawal is done on a Schwab account, I get something on my cell phone immediately alerting me. Same thing with American Express and other accounts. It's really easy to set up. And I think the number one line of defense for you when there's people actually accessing your accounts or your cards, for sure.
Absolutely. So there's some questions that I've seen in the past from some of our clients about, well, how do I keep mobile apps secure? And the answer is mobile apps are inherently more secure than using a website, because it is on your phone. It is a direct link. It's not for the major banking institutions. You're not going to see like a lot of options in the Play Store or in the App Store that will give you the ability to log into something fake. They've locked that down. So, you could potentially on a website side, go to the wrong website and log in. And it wasn't the correct website, and then hackers have it. Whereas with a mobile app, you can be fairly almost completely certain that it's
if
accurate.
you're logging on to your Schwab accounts using the Schwab mobile app, which I do every day, you're connected to Schwab that way. I'm not going through a browser. I'm not going through Safari or Chrome. It's a one-to-one connection. And also, they have good 2-factor authentication services within inside those apps. So I think that's a critical component too. If you can use an app to access your accounts, you should be using an app whenever possible, for sure.
Agreed.
Okay, so now flipping over to that, good segue here, device security. So you can do all the right things with email and websites, but if you don't have a secure device, you're going to set yourself up for problems. So let's dive into that category for a couple minutes.
So antivirus is vitally important. All of your computers should be running antivirus. It's not that expensive. And it's definitely worth it. You can also typically buy them in packs of larger. So if you have 3 devices, you can buy a pack of 3. So each device should have its own antivirus, and it should be an antivirus that regularly scans all of your documents and regularly updates with the antivirus software, because obviously technology is full of innovators, and that's true of hackers as well.
Yeah, so some of the common providers out there for antivirus, you have, we use a product called ESET, which has a whole host of services for both monitoring and making sure that our operating system is updated properly. I personally at home, I use McAfee's subscription service, which allows me to have up to 5 devices. so I can protect my kids' laptops,
Mhm.
my home tablets and things like that. But there are certainly lots of choices out there. You just want to make sure that it's a reputable company
Company,
that,
do your due diligence.
yep, and make sure you keep it updated. That's really important, because if antivirus is only as good as its last update. So if you don't have it set up to update regularly, you're having old patches on there that won't keep you secure to the latest hacking schemes that are out there, for sure.
All of your devices should be password protected. That includes phones. I cannot count the number of times I've watched somebody pick up a phone and it's clearly not password protected. Computers, routers, anything that you have that can have a password should have a password.
Yeah, and also I think what's important too, especially for devices, you want to have your device set up so that it will automatically lock after a short period of time. Because if you have a computer at home and you never lock it and it's on, like my computer at home is on all the time, I just leave it running. If it's not set to automatically lock, anybody that's in your house, including somebody who gets into your house illegally, can gain access and then do what they want in there. So with the phones, they should be set up to lock without activity for a very short period of time. And you should always be in a habit of locking your devices when you walk away from them. That's another one.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime it's out of eyesight, that's our rule of thumb here. The computer should be locked. A little shortcut for people who use Windows machines. If you hit the Windows key and the L on the keyboard, it will lock your computer for you. The other important component of that is that you have to set it up so that it prompts you to input your password next time you log in, because you can set it up to lock and not prompt.
Talking about complexity of passwords, because we get this question a lot, especially from our employees who are not happy that we make them change their passwords all the time, and that we make them have very long passwords or phrases or difficult passwords to retype.
General rule of thumb, the minimum most software require is 8 characters with a special character and a number and at least one capital letter and at least one lowercase letter. That is not that's like the bare minimum. Like if that's, you want to do better than the bare minimum. So our suggestion is always to use a passphrase, because if you get 3 or 4 words together, that's going to make it longer and it's going to make it more complex and harder to guess. The other thing that you want to watch out for, you want to try to use numbers and special characters, but it's important that you don't use similar passwords. So if all of your passwords are password and then a number sequence and then an exclamation point, changing the number sequence on each account they're functionally the same password if they can guess one, and you've got a pattern like that in your passwords, they can guess the rest of them.
And when it comes to, I know that most people will use the same password for all sorts of different accounts, and they'll just use it over and over and over again. So why is that a bad idea?
Well, because if they can guess one password and they've got your password and they've got your email, they can just try that on any account they want. And if you're reusing the passwords, they're going to have access to multiple things. The other problem with that is if you get a notification from Yahoo and it says this password has been compromised, you got to change it. So you go in and you change your Yahoo password. That's great. Did you remember to change the other 5 accounts that use that same password? Because that password is still compromised, regardless of whether it's specifically the other account that has been, sorry, I forgot.
This is a big thing that we see where people have, 10 accounts set up with the same password. And then one of the places that they had that password had a breach, like Target, they had their big breach, right? So now the people that gathered all that information can now systematically go and test all your other accounts. And lo and behold, if you're using the same password, they're going to be able to get in. That's a a lot of times that's how people gain access to begin with. They
Yeah.
breach one and then they can get to many. So we absolutely require here for our employees, they cannot use the same password. And we actually have software that measures that and says, hey, you've got 3 accounts here with the same password. You need to change 2 of them.
Yes. And the other thing to note about that is that that's not necessarily an instantaneous thing. Just because that account got compromised, it could be 6 months or a year later, and they're trying those passwords. And if you haven't changed those, long after you've forgotten that Yahoo got breached, because you fixed that problem, right? So
And
it
sometimes
is a
these
time
companies
thing.
don't even know that they've been breached. So in a lot of cases, they find out well after the fact that they've been breached, and now now it's too late because
Yeah.
people have gotten into your other accounts. So
And that kind of leads perfectly into talking about why we have to change our passwords every 60 to 90 days is the recommendation. It's because just because your passwords are secure from your end doesn't mean that, the bank wasn't hacked in some way and your password was compromised and they didn't realize it for 6 months or a year. That's one of the big things that you see with a lot of these breaches is it sometimes takes them a long time to realize that there's been compromised data. So that's why we really encourage our clients, and we enforce it within our business to make sure that we're changing our passwords regularly.
and of course, saving of passwords. I know you're going to tell everybody, make sure you write them down and put them in a drawer in your desk, right?
Super secure. So we do recommend that you use a password manager. We're not going to try to promote a specific program, but a couple of the top ones that are out there is Dashlane, Keeper, Zoho, Bitwarden, 1Password, and NordPass are some of the top 6 that are out there. I encourage you to do your own due diligence. But the question is are there risks to using a password manager? And my answer to that, because I'm going to be honest with you, is going to be yes. But cybersecurity is all about balancing the risks. And is the risk greater using a password manager or greater storing your passwords on your computer or in a file or storing them in your desk in a file? The risk is going to be greater that you're storing it unencrypted. So password managers really are the way to go.
So don't write it down and put it in the glove box of your car, right? That's probably a bad idea.
Don't put it on Post-it notes and stick it all
Post-it
over your
notes.
desk.
Post-it notes are bad. Right.
But I did want to talk a little bit because obviously there have been some breaches with password managers, and specifically somebody was asking me about LastPass and that breach. So I just wanted to give you kind of a quick overview of what happened there and why we still recommend password
So
managers.
just to set this up for everybody, LastPass, a password management software that you can use to store all your passwords. They had a breach. It was pretty public.
Yes.
So all these people and folks that were using this software, of course, and they had their passwords in there was a breach, and it sent kind of shockwaves through the industry. So what happened?
So in an overly simplified, there are great articles about there if you want to research it more. But essentially, hackers stole encrypted copies of some users' password vaults. And additionally, there were some issues where some of the metadata, like the URLs people were visiting, weren't encrypted. Now, because the hackers stole encrypted copies, it's not currently possible for them necessarily to unencrypt it. So the only way for those hackers to access that data would be for them to unlock it using what they call a brute force attack, which is basically throwing every password combination at it and hoping to guess the right one. Now, if you have a weak password, it's going to be fairly easy for the computer, because obviously it's not somebody sitting there typing it in. It's going to be a computer that's throwing these at it. It would be fairly easy for them to then access that vault of passwords. So if your master password, which is the password that allows you access to your password vault, is strong, it's unlikely that that attack would work.
But if it's password 123, you probably got a problem.
You definitely have a problem. 100% there is a problem there. So I think there is an argument to be made that even with the data breach, using a password manager is still a better option, with the caveat that you have to have a strong master password. And the reason for that is our memory. I don't know about you, but I have 225 passwords. I cannot remember all of those passwords and have them all be strong and secure. To be honest, I probably can't memorize more than like 3 or 4 before I start to lose complexity.
Well, what's nice too is these software packages will actually help you create passwords, generate the passwords for you, and you can control how long they are and how many characters they are. So most of my passwords, I don't know. I mean, they are just like, half of them I've never even seen. They're just like 16 to 20 characters long, and it's saved in the password manager, and I don't even want to know what it is.
Exactly. And it also makes it super easy to update your passwords. You can just go in and tell it, I'm updating this password, have it generate a random password, and you don't have to look at it and you don't have to remember it because the password manager is going to remember it for you. It's basically acting as your memory.
Okay, so I have real quick here, I have a comment too. And this is a great point. Another advantage of cloud password management is there's no risk of losing them in a ransomware attack on your actual computer. So, and that's a great point. Like if you, if you're storing your passwords at home and you have them written down on a password list and on your desk in your office or in a drawer, and your home gets robbed, you could lose the passwords. And the same thing if you're storing your passwords on your computer in a file. If someone attacks you with ransomware, you're going to pay a fee if you ever want those back. So
yes,
right. Okay, let's move on to two-factor authentication. Everybody should know what this is at this point, but let's talk about the finer points of that.
So two-factor authentication is essentially a second way of proving you are who you are. Sometimes it's a code sent to your phone. Sometimes it's from an authenticator app that will generate a random code. It can also be things like security questions. So basically, in order for a hacker to get into your account, they would not only have to have your username and password, but they would also have to have access to this two-factor authentication. So it adds an extra layer of security, and that's kind of one of the things that cybersecurity is all about, is layering your security so that it makes it that much more difficult for other people to access it. General rules of thumb is that authentication apps are going to be better than a text message code if possible.
Just briefly, just in case anybody out there doesn't know what an authenticator app is, talk a little bit about that.
Authenticator apps are apps that you can download to your phone. There's a Google Authenticator app, and VIP Cement Tech is one of the other ones that I know of off the top of my head. And they basically are just programs that you link to your accounts, and they will generate a random code. So when you go to access your account, you type in your username, you type in your password, and then it prompts you to input the code, and it won't let you get into the account without the code.
A little code app here, if you can see it, is basically just generating random numbers. And when you log in, it's going to ask you for that number, and it changes I think this one's every 30 seconds or something like that. So.
And those would be slightly more secure than a text message, because it's possible that a hacker could pick off a text message. They're a lot less likely to have access to the app itself. The other thing is that I strongly feel biometrics are the way of the future. Your phone, think about your phone. A lot of iPhones will unlock with facial recognition or a thumbprint. A lot of software and computers are being designed to use biometrics now, because those are very hard to fake.
Okay.
As far as security questions, those are probably going to be the least secure option, because think about how many security question answers you have on your Facebook profile right now. What was your first dog? When's your birthday? What's your kid's name?
I can never remember. It's super secure for me because I can never remember the answers to half those questions. But
yeah,
right. But a lot of social engineering goes on where people can figure out the answers. Your mother's maiden name is no longer a secure way of answering questions.
So one of the suggestions I would make, I don't normally tell people to lie, but make something up. Lie, put in a different answer. The important thing is, and most password managers will allow you to add notes to your passwords, make sure you keep that information, because if you're going to lie, you have to then remember that lie 10 years from now, potentially.
Right. That's a good one.
Um,
Okay, let's talk about encryption.
Most computers have the ability to encrypt your hard drive. And what that essentially does, it won't stop somebody from stealing your computer, but it would prevent them from accessing your data. They may be able to wipe the computer and still use it, but they wouldn't have your data. So I will say that Windows has BitLocker, I believe it's called, which can be turned on. Most Windows up-to-date Windows computers should have the ability to turn that on, and you should definitely be turning that on if you have that.
Yeah, so users should really be doing a search on their computer for BitLocker, all one word, and it will take you to the setting, and it will tell you if it's on or off. And if you turn it on, the computer will encrypt all your data. So if somebody steals your computer, let's say you take your laptop. I actually had this happen to me. I had an employee once who went to a concert in Toronto, brought their laptop, left it in the car. Someone broke into the car, stole the laptop. But because the laptop was encrypted, even if they could figure out a way to get into the laptop, the data could not be accessible. But if you don't encrypt your data, sooner or later, someone's going to be able to get into that, and then they'll be able to extract enough data from there to do some real damage. So encryption on a computer is like a 100% first thing you should be doing when you get a device.
And in addition to that, some computers and almost all phones have the ability to remote wipe. You should set up that feature as well. That's going to be a feature that allows you to, let's say you've lost it. It usually ties into the locate device, but it also gives you the ability to wipe any information that you wouldn't want in the hands of anyone else. It doesn't bring you back your laptop, but at least your data is safe.
Yeah, and one important thing with remote wipe, and we have that functionality here too for our mobile users. I tell them, make sure you are backing up your devices. Make sure your iPhone is set to automatically back up, because if you have to, if you lose your device and you need to remote wipe that thing, and you don't have a backup, you've lost all your contacts and everything like that. So make sure backups are really important, and make sure obviously your backups are encrypted.
Yes.
For sure. Okay. Let's see. Let's move on to updates.
So updates are one of the simplest but most important things you can do to protect yourself, because updates on a antivirus are going to bring you the most recent antivirus. It's going to know all the most recent viruses, etc., malware, and it'll be able to protect you against it. Computers, I again cannot tell you the number of times where somebody's asked me to take a look at their laptop, and the very first thing I do is install 100 updates to their Windows program. So it's very important to keep them updated. Most devices will give you the ability to auto update. That is also in the settings. So if you search update, it'll bring you to the settings, and you can usually tell it, I want to auto update.
Yeah, and it's important on Windows as well that when you turn on your automatic updates, you want to give the computer permission to restart once the update is done, because a lot of times what happens is you can set it up so that it downloads, but then you'll have a little icon in the bottom of your corner that says you must restart. And if you don't restart, you haven't actually applied the update.
Yeah.
So a best practice would be to set it up so that it automatically updates in hours that you're not using it. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, have the update downloaded, installed, and restart your computer so that you're always up to date. And another one that I see very commonly is Google Chrome users. So Google Chrome is constantly updating its software. And if you go into the upper right-hand corner of Google Chrome, you'll see, I think it's 3 little dots up there. And you go down to the help section in there, there's an update, check for updates. You can actually set that to automatically update, and Google is constantly updating their software, and it's a good way to keep yourself protected. But if you don't have automatic updates set on there, you're at the mercy of your memory to remember to do it, and that can be an issue for sure. Anything else on updates?
No.
Okay. You talked about
I already skipped ahead a little bit.
Yeah, perfect.
So cameras, If your computer is compromised, hackers can potentially access your camera, which means that they can be watching you
And listening. to
and
you.
listening to you when you're home. And so one of the things that most of the newer devices now offer it's a little toggle next to the camera if you have a built-in camera where you can slide it to the left or the right, and there'll be a little red dot and it covers the camera. Now, some of us, I have a home computer that's old, don't have that device. You can also purchase they're little stickers that you can stick on that will allow you to manually close or open your camera. I do recommend, if you have a web camera that's separate device, unplug it when it's not in use.
Yep. And also a lot of software out there will actually have specific permissions you can set that make you prompt to allow use of the camera or allow use of the audio. So I know at home, I have a camera at home. I actually unplug the camera when I'm home because I think the audio feature is more dangerous than I mean, nobody wants to look, at least at my computer, but the audio, listening to what you're saying is super critical, because you could actually tell somebody what the password is and boom, now they have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So phones, you may want to consider, they are useful features, but turning off Siri or Alexa or marking it so that it doesn't automatically record information. So essentially, if you have an Alexa or a Siri on your phone, you can set it so that you have to press a button for the virtual assistant to work, so that it's not just constantly recording and then sending you advertisements for things that you discuss.
Right, exactly. So you can actually set it up so, like on an iPhone, it's just the button on the side, and you just hold that button down and you say, hey Siri, what's the temperature outside? And Siri will come back and tell you that it's freezing because it's Buffalo. Actually, it's pretty warm today, so today's probably not a good example of cold, but it will do that for you, and not be actively listening, which is really one of the big issues with these softwares.
The other thing just to note about that active listening, I know for Amazon that you can log into your Amazon account and delete any recordings it has as far as voice commands, etc. So that is something that you can go in and manually remove if that's a concern for you.
Okay. And then privacy settings. I think we touched on it a little bit, but
we touched on it a little bit. At a minimum, I think everyone should be reviewing their privacy settings for their social media. So for example, who can see what on your Facebook? Is it all public? Hackers use that information. They know what your grandkid's name is. They know, what your kids' names are. So they can potentially use that information if they're trying to pass two-factor authentication. So the other thing is not just social media, but also privacy settings for apps. A lot of times apps will ask you, if you've downloaded it to your phone, hey, do you want to give this app access to your camera or to your contacts? Stop and think about it. Do you want to give them access to it?
Yeah, usually when I get that question, my first response to that is no.
Yeah.
So, try to limit that as much as possible, because all those points of information, especially on social media, can really be used to harm you. Yeah. Okay, so in the time that we have left, we're rounding out this presentation. We've got 10 minutes left, and we'll have a time for any questions if we do. So let's talk about triage. What do you do if you suspect that you have been the victim of fraud on your computer or your phone or your accounts? What's the first thing you should do?
So honestly, it's the same thing as medical triage. You want to stop the bleeding. So you want to notify the bank, the credit card, the financial planners. Tell someone. Don't feel ashamed. It can happen to anyone, fraud. And so you want to make sure that you get the money cut off, basically. You don't want to have them continually have access. If you notice something, stop the bleeding. Most banks and financial institutions have a fraud or identity theft team. And so once you contact your bank, they're going to notify that team and they're going to assign somebody to your case, and they're going to get the ball rolling to make sure that no one has access that shouldn't.
Important distinction here, because I have seen this happen. Actually, there's a specific example of this happening recently. So when you call the bank to notify them of fraud, please make sure that you are actually using a valid bank phone number, because sometimes what fraudsters will do is they will actually impersonate the bank and give you an 800 number that is not the bank. So really what you want to do is especially if you have like a mobile app or something like that, go in there and get the phone number from the app and call that
Correct.
way, so that you're not actually just calling a fraudster who's going to give you even worse treatment than if you just gave away your password.
And if you have a card, most banks are going to have that information right on the back of a card. If you think your device has been compromised, you're like, something's going on with my computer, take it off the internet, run a virus scan. There are services provided by most tech places like, now I'm blanking on all the tech places.
Geek Squad,
Nerd Herd, whatever they are. They have services that will clean your computer or your device if you take it to them and say, I think it's been compromised.
And then, when it comes to changing passwords, I mean, for me personally, if I feel like I've been hacked in some way, the first thing I'm going to do is change my email password, because they could be gaining access to that. And then you want to really start changing passwords for your financial accounts first.
Yeah, I would
password manager.
Password manager would be the second thing. Change that master password, and then just sort of work your way down the list in terms of priority. So financial institutions, anything with access to your credit card or information like that, you're going to want to work your way through that. The next thing is you're going to want to check your credit for any unusual activity. So Credit Karma has a service that it's going to alert you to any issues. So anytime somebody tries to open a line of credit, anytime somebody does succeed in opening a line of credit, it's going to alert you to things.
Yeah, Credit Karma has a great app, and you can set it up to give you notifications. I have it on my phone. And they'll send you notifications saying, hey, I noticed you, paid off this loan, or I noticed you opened this credit card. It's a great way to check your credit score as well.
Yes.
Now, they will try to sell you things on Credit Karma. It's a free service, but the app is really good. You can set it up to send you emails, or give you notifications on your phone. Great way to look at your credit history and your open accounts for sure. I highly recommend it.
You can also get one free credit report each year from one of the major credit companies. You should be reviewing that in full at least once a year to make sure that no activity has happened since the last time you looked at it that you didn't know about.
And you can also freeze your credit, which is probably a smart thing to do if you don't plan on getting a car loan in the near future or opening an account. You can just freeze your credit so that if somebody does try to do that, the credit bureaus will not allow them to get the credit, which will stop it from happening.
You can also add extra security. Most financial places will offer this to you as an option. Pro tip, you can also do it before there's an issue, but you can set up Schwab offers voice recognition and verbal passwords, so no one can call in and make changes to the account, even if they have a full account number, if they can't pass those security checks. A lot of places are moving towards having codes sent to you so that while you're talking to them, you get a text message and you have to read back the code to them. So there are a lot of extra security that you can set up on the account, and you can do that now before anything's happened.
Great. Okay, so I think that basically covers everything we wanted to talk about tonight. I don't see any questions on the board, but we want to let you know that if you do have questions, feel free to email us at invest@levelfa.com. We also post a weekly cybersecurity tip on our social media pages, so please feel free to join that. And I always invite people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There will be this recording will be on our YouTube channel probably by tomorrow at some time. And then we have lots of other videos on there as well on different financial topics and other cyber issues as well. So thank everybody for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Bethany, for a great recap. And everybody have a great evening. Thanks for coming.
Good night.
Good night.